Dear students, as in many professions, there are various types of teachers. But there are certain kind of teachers who are popular with you, who are friends with you. And there are certain whom you admire and whom you are afraid of. Here is such a teacher and whose story we are going to read today. The play's name is The Browning Version. It is written by Terence Rattigan. Terence Rattigan was born in 1911 and he has been a prolific playwright. He is very famous and he was educated in Oxford University. He has worked mostly about the middle class and has used very natural settings to which we can relate. Now, this play is an extract from a bigger play with the same name, The Browning Version. It is mainly about a teacher who is very strict, a disciplinarian, and hence he is very unpopular amongst his colleagues as well as his students. And here we will talk about a student who tells us how he is in awe of him. Meanwhile, let's talk about the characters in the play. It is a drama, so there are conversational scenes here. The characters in the play are Taplow, a 16-year-old boy who is Mr. Crocker Harris, Mr. Andrew Crocker Harris's student. There is Frank, a science teacher who is a colleague of Mr. Crocker Harris, and Mr. Andrew Crocker Harris, who is the strict teacher we are going to talk about, and his wife Millie Crocker Harris. The story is about, as I earlier told you, a strict teacher who is not regarded very respectfully either by his colleagues or his students alike, because he is not a regular happy-go-lucky person. He is a strict disciplinarian and a hardliner teacher who believes in imparting quality education with dignity. The scene opens with a conversation between Taplow and Frank. Taplow, as I told you earlier, is a 16-year-old boy who is a student of Mr. Andrew Crocker Harris. He has come to Mr. Crocker Harris's house for extra work at the end of the term, when the term has ended, and he is waiting for his result to be declared tomorrow. Frank is a science teacher, Mr. Crocker's colleague, who finds him there, and they strike up a conversation. Now Taplow tells Frank that he is awaiting his result and has been called for extra work by Mr. Harris because he had missed the class last week. He reveals that he wants to take up science, but he has not been able to make a decision because Mr. Crocker Harris has not given him his remove as in result. And as in the fashion as declared by the headmaster, the result will be declared at the end of the term by Mr. Crocker Harris. He is unlike other teachers who tell the students the results unofficially. He does not relieve his students of the tension. And when asked about his result, when Taplow remembers that when he asked about his result, he was told that he will be given what he deserved, no more and no less. So, Mr. Andrew Crocker Harris does not pass out any favors. When Frank suggests that he might get extra credit, Taplow says that such rules don't work with the Croc. The Croc is probably Mr. Andrew Crocker Harris's nickname that the students have given him. He is not very popular, and then Frank starts imitating him and repeats the no less no more remark. Frank tells him that he could cut as in he could leave because Mr. Crocker Harris is late, but Taplow doesn't even budge. He says that if he goes away, Mr. Crocker Harris will probably follow him home. That is the amount of awe that Mr. Crocker Harris generates. He is so strictly respected that no student will try to disobey him. Frank is very impressed by this, and then they talk further, and Frank asks him whether he beats his students. That is why they are so afraid. Is that why they are so afraid of him? Mr. Taplow says no, he does not beat his students. He is not a sadist. He just has no feelings. He is so strict. He just has no feelings. He doesn't take pity on anyone. He doesn't like anyone exceptionally. He doesn't hate anyone. He just judges all his students on their work and dedication. And then Taplow admits that he somewhat likes Crocker Harris. Now at this point of time, Frank is thought to admit that he is wrong to imitate a colleague, and he is also envious of the fact that the students like Mr. Crocker Harris so much. At that point of time, Mrs. Crocker Harris, Millie Crocker Harris enters, and she also tells Taplow that he can come for some time, go for some time and come back. But Taplow again refuses to budge. He says that he will be caught and that will be the end of him. Then Mrs. Crocker gives him an excuse. She hands him a prescription and tells him to go get it written. So she gives him an excuse on platter. Now the theme of the play is success and failure and how we perceive it. See, Mr. Crocker Harris was considered a failure by majority of students, his colleagues, and probably even his wife, because at the end of the play she also is not very respectful of his attitude. But he is in fact a successful teacher because he is able to command a lot of respect and awe from his students. Also, as you have been reading the play, you must be thinking, why the title, the Browning version? Well, first of all, the Browning version was a translation by Mr. Robert Browning of the Greek play Agamemnon, the tragedy of Agamemnon. In this play, the character Agamemnon was a Greek character who was very frightening and adamant. And similarly, Mr. Andrew Crocker Harris is also very strict, very frightening and adamant for the students. So, the play Agamemnon also has a mention in the conversation between Frank and Taplow. Therefore, probably Andrew Crocker Harris is the implied version of the character of Agamemnon, a strict and disciplinarian teacher.